Welcome,
Hello,
everyone.
oh, sorry.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today. We are so happy to have you here for our PathLock Innovation Series. I'm putting a link in the chat right now to the schedule of events for the day. So if you would like to see any of the other sessions that we have coming up, you can click on that link and it'll take you to register for them. We're really excited for this session. We have a couple great presenters that will introduce themselves in just a moment. My name's Stephanie Anderson. I'm the Global Webinar Manager here at PathLock. Our session today is titled Protecting Data in PeopleSoft. And before we go any further, I just have a few housekeeping items. If you have any audio issues during this webinar, click on Preferences and then Audio. From there, you can check to see if you're using the appropriate audio device. You can also click on the play sound to check if you can hear the sound coming through your speakers. There will be a Q&A session following the presentation. So if you have any questions, please type them into the questions box that you will see on your control panel for our speakers to answer at the end of the event. To prevent background noise, everyone is on mute. And with that, I'll turn the time over to our speakers to introduce themselves.
Awesome, thanks, Stephanie. And thanks everyone for joining today. My name is Hendrik Spaden. Some of you may know me. I'm an ex-Gray Heller Appsian person. I am focused now as the general manager on building CY2's North American operations. I'm joined by my colleague, Ernst LaHaye. Those of you that have been in the PeopleSoft Campus Solutions world probably know Ernst or know of Ernst. He's a founder and managing director of CY2, and I think along with CY2 is probably one of the acknowledged leading experts functionally in campus solutions. I am going to do a quick intro, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ernst. So who's CY2? For those of you that don't know us, we're a PeopleSoft Campus Solutions consultancy and solutions development firm. We've done hundreds of projects around, in 15 or more countries. We were founded in the Netherlands, but we've done projects, as I said, all over the world. My focus is to bring everything that CY2 has done for our EU clients to North America. I think significantly we're an Oracle development partner. What that means is that we've got a really tight and very symbiotic relationship with Oracle's higher ed group. One of the proof points is for those of you that are implementing POM 27, there's some pretty interesting ODI and campus solutions integration capabilities and examples in that POM. We help build that. So that goes to describing how close we are with Oracle. In the US, we're focusing on our software solution products, which are listed there. We'd love to circle back with all of you and tell you about all of them, but we're talking about Anonymizer today. And then from the services component, we've got probably 30 plus consultants, and some of those are working on campus solutions revitalization. Those of you that may know Butler University, we did a pretty extensive program with them, and also I had mentioned chatbots. Our agenda today, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on data violations. I think because this is a security-focused conference, I think everybody's probably pretty familiar with why security. I'll give you a peek into who some of our customers are, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ernst, who will get into really the subject that I know you all are here today, is to find out how to protect prod and non-prod with the anonymization tool. This slide is really meant to show that our focus, being education, is definitely a focus of the bad guys. It has been for a very long time. Student data, financial aid data, payor data in the U.S. is extremely attractive to the bad guys. So I know that all of you that are in the higher ed industry are well aware that your whole sort of defense in depth strategy is really, really important. A couple of examples that have been in the public domain about non-prod breaches. Many of you may know the Uber breach. And then also there was a shutterfly breach where test systems were used for the bad guys to gain access and then move laterally throughout an organization. A few of our customers, Ernst knows more about these. This one is in the Netherlands. The one I wanted to mention that I know is the INSEAD Business School, one of the top business schools in the world with campuses around the world. Interestingly enough, they do a lot of B2B business where corporate, public sector, and military clients will engage INSEAD to teach their employees, and obviously in the public sector and military, potential participants. And those clients actually require that the participant IDs be completely anonymized from the start. So we in fact wrote Anonymizer specifically for INSEAD. So when somebody enrolls for a class, their email, their name is not known. I think it's a syntax of number at INSEAD or at the company, the military-branch.edu, and then that anonymized ID actually flows through their LMS systems, Canvas and Intrepid, and there may be one other. So it's a pretty interesting use case, and really was the inception for what we built. And then another school. So our goal is to bring this, solution to the U.S. In many ways, the EU is ahead of the United States in terms of privacy concerns and compliance. And so we hope that the work that we've done across the pond will translate nicely to U.S. institutions and organizations. Why use us? Why anonymize? Anonymization protects data in the case of a breach. I think the most important thing, and for those of you in the PeopleSoft world, it's almost a truism that copies of production data are made for development and testing. So I mean, it's almost like there's an immediate threat vector. But if you anonymize that data in the secondary systems, then developers and testers can easily work without the fear of being breached. It's typically really fast. Ernst is going to do, I think, a pretty cool demo that we'll talk about in a bit, actually operating in a production environment. It's a demo database, but a production environment. And then for those of you that have implemented bolt-ons and modules inside of PeopleSoft, I know from my experience with Gray Heller and Apsian, one of the first questions is how does a bolt-on affect your technical debt and your upgrades? And then this is standalone, and therefore it won't collide at all with tools or PUMs. We'd like to launch a poll. This will give us a sense of who's in the audience. And the poll is, how does your organization protect its non-prod systems? We'll keep this open just for 30 seconds or a minute. If those of you that are on could answer, hopefully we've captured pretty much all of the answers, then we'll display the results and move on. I think we're almost good. The data hasn't changed. Let me give it a couple more seconds. I think we're good. Sorry. Can you see my screen?
We can see the poll, Mark.
You can see the poll, just the poll.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sometimes
Yeah, we can't see your screen, but we can see the poll.
Perfect. Thanks, Steph. So interesting. So a significant of you are doing neither, and then I think the next most frequent is anonymized. But thank you for answering. Thank you for answering that. Let me go back to my screen. Can you all see my poll number 1 screen? Are we good there?
No, we don't see your screen yet.
We don't see your screen. We just see the poll.
Okay. Hide results. There we go.
Yep, perfect.
Now, so we should be back to the poll number 1 slide.
Yep.
Yes, we are.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Super. So how do we protect customer data? Well, my colleague is probably the best person to do this, and I am going to change presenters and make Ernst the presenter. Just hold on half a second, Ernst.
Okay. Well, while you're doing that, I can actually at least speak about this. Hendricks, can you just show your screen for one more second? Is that possible or not? So that we can actually talk about the configuration there, or do you want to actually just start the demo? That's also fine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, for sure. Sorry,
No,
everyone.
it's no problem at all. No, it's no problem at all. It's perfectly okay.
There we go.
Just to actually explain something, perhaps.
Yep.
Before.
Sorry, Ernst.
No, it's absolutely fine. So hello, yeah, thank you all for being in our presentation today. Thank you, Hendricks, for actually this fantastic story about us and about what we have actually done. Because what we actually have built is for us at least almost of vital importance, because we actually work with non-production and production data every day at a number of customers, where we actually do maintenance and of course also projects. And anonymizing data is a fantastic feeling, I would like to say. It sounds a bit weird perhaps, but it means that you're sure that you actually are not by mistake doing something whereby you're suddenly sending 1,500 emails to people, or one of your personnel members actually by mistake actually selects lots of data from the database and actually loses it somewhere along the way. So in an anonymized database, nothing is actually of importance anymore as far as people, I like Hendricks' words, the bad guys actually would be interested in. So for us, anonymization is actually very important for us, but also for our customers in both cases to actually have the feeling that everything actually is no longer relevant for outside people to actually look at. The anonymizer works in both production as well as in non-production, as we will see today, whereby we can actually do full or partial database anonymizations focused on the personal data that people actually have in the system. That's our main focus, of course. And because it's production and non-production, and because we believe at CY2 that configurability is the vital essence of everything that we actually build, the anonymizer is really configurable. It actually is easy and purely front-end to actually create and maintain multiple setups for different environments, multiple setups in the same environment, and also being able to anonymize data which is not actually delivered by Oracle, and database tables which are not delivered by Oracle. Anything that you actually would like to anonymize that actually has some form of data that you would like to actually update is possible using the anonymizer, and all of that from the front end of your system within Campus Solutions itself. With that, if I may, Hendricks, then I will now actually, if you please can now actually switch the screen to me, then I will actually open the screen. Yep, thank you very much.
You bet.
So here we are, and here we are in Campus Solutions. As you can see, although the tool actually is built and demoed today in a Campus Solutions environment, it works as well in HR. It would work as well work in a finance system as well. Any people tools environment that you would like to anonymize is capable of being done. The demo is actually in a Campus Solutions environment simply because we are more focused on that in essence than in other environments, but technically speaking, there is no limitation as such. So let's jump into the anonymizer here for a moment. The anonymizer is a process that we actually, anonymization is a process that we run using an application engine, as we call it, to actually process the data through and then actually anonymize the data. And of course, as it's a process and it's configurable, we have certain setup to do those anonymizations. And I would like to take you today through a few anonymization options, as we would say, and also for focus on the fact that actually you can have as many templates as you like. But I've actually configured 3 templates today to explain you one of the, or some of the key features of the functionality today. The first one to talk about is probably the one that's mostly used, and that's our batch notification or batch, sorry, notifications, batch anonymization, whereby we actually are focused on updating data and deleting data and scrambling data of large volumes of people. The whole database, but you could also say a whole academic career, for instance, but let's call it a whole database to actually be clear or easy to work with. Now, this batch setup actually, as you will see over here, actually has a type of template of batch. It actually has the ability to say that everything that we update as far as default data is concerned, like a first name or a last name or an address, is going to be appended by the Ample ID that actually is in that record. So it means that if you actually were called Ernst, like me, and the default name to actually call everybody would be first name, afterwards, then it would be Ernst. It would be first name underscore and then my Ample ID. So to actually make data still recognizable for a test system. If everybody's called first name, it's a bit of a hard search to actually find somebody that you would like to find. Whereas if you actually append with an Ample ID, everybody is still unique, but nobody is recognizable anymore, of course. We have a specific function for birth dates. At least where we are working in Europe, birth dates are really important in all kinds of contexts. Some people actually may be contacted, or some people need to be contacted via their parents if they're older than 18, for instance, or if they're older than 16 or younger than 16. And all of those kinds of birth date logic is put into a flexible application package where you actually can write your own logic around birth dates, as well as logic around other places that you would actually update information specifically via a piece of people code. But for us, birth dates is a really important one because that actually has lots of implications for people who need to test things in test systems. So therefore, birth date configuration is something that we do. Identifier scrambling, I'll talk about in a moment when we're talking about a specific template focused on ID scrambling. So I'll just actually scroll on for a moment until here, where we actually have name anonymization as well as email, as you can see in external systems. The thing with names and emails and addresses and phone numbers is you have multiple types. And you might want to actually do different things with multiple types of data there. So let's say a legal name may be deleted and a primary name will probably not be deleted because then you can't find the person anymore in the system. So a primary name would be updated and a preferred name would be deleted and a legal name would be deleted. And you, of course, via the front end can choose however many address or name types or phone number types or email address types you have and actually choose the different types and actually make a choice on how you want to actually update or skip or delete a particular type of data. What you're going to actually update it with is something that we'll see in a moment. But the idea here is that you're able to say different types of data need to be managed differently within the same table. Email is the same thing, external systems the same thing, address types the same thing, phone numbers the same thing. We focused on the most important, in our view at least, personal data elements that are recognizable, that are identifiable, and we say, okay, tell me how you would like to actually manage those types. This is not a real, let's say, setup as maybe an institution would do. That is their own choice. I don't actually go, I don't change what they actually want, but at least I've given you a few options here, as you can see, to actually see how we actually would manage data. Now, this is the actual setup of the template in general. Next step is to actually focus on different records. So in total, and I'm just going to actually see if I can make my screen one tiny bit smaller so it's a bit easier to manage. So in total, in this database setup, we actually have 25 records that we actually are going to anonymize. And any of those 25 records, and if I just switch one or two here for a moment, like names, it would be a nice one to actually work with. Let's actually jump to names here. So if we look at the names record, for instance, the names record has a number of fields which are identified as sensitive and therefore should be actually updated. And we work with the privacy framework that Oracle has delivered for every customer worldwide. And if you use the privacy framework, then you're aware of the fact that you can actually set fields to be sensitive and set fields to be personal identification fields. So if you want, you can actually configure, if you have already, or if you are planning to actually configure the privacy framework to actually manage, for instance, query masking and data masking, and maybe you've actually seen the Jim Marion's presentation about data masking as well there. So if you're actually focused on data masking anyway for your production systems, why not use the same setup to also actually anonymize? Because if all is well, you've actually used those particular sensitive field setups to actually identify which fields are important for you and actually are sensitive. So with this button, you can actually say, okay, I'm going to actually click that button, and I'm going to say that all of the fields that are considered by me as sensitive should at least actually be considered in a anonymization setup. Now, as you can see, some fields are actually selected here and some fields are not. Some fields we simply don't care about if they are actually still what they are, because for us, the fields which are really important are, for instance, the first name search, the last name search, the name, and some other fields there as well. So, and all of those fields actually are being, in our case, scrambled. We have three options here. Either you scramble it, meaning that we take the piece of data from this particular record number 1 and we throw it somewhere into space, and actually it comes back as a record of somebody else. So we literally mix and match all the names of all the people in the database and actually scramble all their pieces into one particular big mess, which is exactly what we want. But in the end, everybody still has a name. And everybody still has a name that actually means something, because they are still actually real names. They are at least real name pieces. If we want to, we could also say, no, actually, we don't want to actually make that a specific scrambled field. We would like to actually do something where we would like to update information, which is possible, because we can also say we're going to update. And if we update, then it says, okay, tell me then what you would like. So you could say, okay, I want the display name to always be display name. And in practice, it's then going to be display name underscore, for instance, CC0001, or whatever your number of your Ample ID would be. So updating would update the value of that field to a default value that you can append with a Ample ID. But in the context of names, for instance, scrambling, of course, makes lots more sense, because it makes it for testers and developers a lot simpler to actually work with. Just to go back for a second here, addresses actually have a setup as well, whereby we can say, okay, we have an address type that you have at home in your country, so to say, but we also have an address type that actually is considered foreign. We have not yet taken into account, as it is just literally released last week, the new address formatting framework by Oracle, but we are intending to do so and look at that for the different countries. But in essence, what we at least have done is said, okay, we have an address default for home addresses, and we have one for foreign addresses, because many universities have a standardized address format for all their foreign countries, and in that way we are able to actually manage those separately, especially also because in a number of countries there are checks around postal codes, and there are checks around how addresses look and what fields are actually in which fields, which pieces of data are in which fields, excuse me, and that means that we actually want to be specific about what we do there. Another one to point out is the fact that, as you can see, the record here is called CY2 names. Any record that you defined in the database as a custom record can actually be picked up. It doesn't make a difference between anything that Oracle has delivered and anything that we actually do. Lastly, or maybe something else to point out as well, think about other records than just the simple, normal, personal data records. There is data about people everywhere in your system. ICR records, financial aid, other types of records, student financials, data records, specific records for localizations in the Netherlands, in Europe, in England, in Belgium. I'm pretty sure there will also be American specific records that actually hold personal data. So think big when you're actually thinking about anonymizing, and not just actually think about 4 or 5 records that actually may hold your personal data that is most important to you. So data can be anonymized from any record in the whole database. Now, In some cases, you don't want to actually keep anything, you just would like to delete things. Let's say that you actually say particular records like addresses, or a record like advising notes, or a record like admissions attachments, you would just like to actually drop completely. That's possible using our master delete records functionality, because otherwise what you end up with is somebody who's completely anonymized, but his transcript actually still says the name of the person, his photo is still him, his passport is still his passport copy. So all of those kinds of things you would like to actually please drop, and then you actually are sure that the data actually is no longer accessible, and therefore nobody can make a mistake of actually seeing that data again. Same could count for communications, same could count for lots of other things that you just actually don't want to keep anything. Now, if I actually just jump for 1 second to here, this is our manual, excuse me. This is our manual, I was going to say. This is our manual setup. And in our manual setup, the idea is really to focus on information that needs to be updated in production. So if you have a I like to be forgotten request, or I would like to be deleted from your database request, then of course you can go through the whole database and try to actually really delete that person, which is still possible, of course, if you want to in PeopleSoft. But the trouble is, if you have to do that lots of times, you actually start to lose specific and very important statistical data about your population of students. And as Hendricks actually mentioned, at institutions like INSEAD, for instance, where there's lots of business-to-business education, people don't like their personnel members to actually be visible in the database of the institution for longer than absolutely necessary. So what we actually do is we actually update these people's records the moment that their course has actually finished and they've gotten a certificate. And to be able to do that, we actually have a manual template, as we call it. And manual in this context means that we're focusing on a smaller population of people to actually replace their photo, to replace their personal data, to replace their phone numbers, their addresses, their work experience, and also importantly, we're focusing to actually make sure that we do not delete particular people who have a constituent type that actually is important to us. So if we have donors, for instance, and a donor actually comes into our institution and actually wants to do a course, and their company says, well, just actually please anonymize this donor, then we as an institution would say, no, rather not, because this person just gave us $10,000, for instance. So we have an exclusion for particular constituent types linked back to contributor relations to make sure that people who are donors, for instance, are actually not picked up for anonymization, even though they actually are asked for by that, for that reason, by, for instance, their company that they work for. So the manual one is really focused on making sure that you actually can anonymize in production without the fear of actually de-anonymizing somebody you don't want to anonymize. Last but absolutely not least, scrambling ample IDs. So scrambling ample IDs and Adam Apple numbers. And for those of you who are not that technical, Adam Apple number is the application number in PeopleSoft, which is about as identifiable as an ample ID. So therefore, we actually have the ability in the system to actually scramble both. We have the ability to scramble ample IDs. And of course, as you all know, there is not just one field in PeopleSoft that actually holds ample IDs. Therefore, we have in this setup 21 different fields that all actually have a ample ID in there as a value. So all of these 21 fields are actually being scrambled in the whole database for all tables in the whole database when we actually do that. And the same counts for anywhere in the system if you want to, where application numbers exist. And what we do in these cases is we actually, when you want to scramble your ample IDs, meaning that your ample IDs are also no longer recognizable at all, we actually take the highest number of the ample ID available in the system, and then we start counting as of that number onwards, and we just randomly pick people and actually then start to change all their ample ID fields all over the database in all tables that actually exist in PeopleSoft. And the same counts for other Apple numbers. We change all the other Apple numbers in all tables and actually make sure, of course, that everything actually stays in sync so that there is no weird data issues when you actually are done anonymizing. But without an Ample ID being recognizable, and an admissions number, and all their personal data being anonymized, it is really, really hard to actually still figure out who this person really was in practice. And the reason that we actually have different templates here is to simply to give ourselves the flexibility to say, are we going to actually just anonymize by changing the names, or are we going to actually also change the Ample IDs, and are we also going to do the other mobile numbers, and so on and so on. So it gives us the flexibility, or at least it gives us and the institutions the flexibility to actually change whatever they want, whenever they want to. Okay, so all of that about setup. Just to be sure, and I actually wanted to talk about it for one tiny second, this is a list of 68 records that actually are in this particular setup and actually are all meant to be truncated every time we start to anonymize. And all of these records are records that we really do not want anymore. And I'm sure that you actually have DBAs or system administrators or PS admins that actually do these kinds of things when you clone databases normally. The beauty of this particular setup is you can do it through front. So if there are very large tables in your system, or there are very sensitive data tables in your system that you really don't want at all anymore, you can simply truncate the tables, and then all the data in there will be lost. And that's exactly the idea, because it actually makes it less recognizable. So on top of what many PS admins do on the technical side of PeopleSoft when it comes to deleting logs and deleting other things, we are able through this setup to also actually truncate lots of tables which have functional data in them, and with it actually make sure that we are compliant as far as GDPR regulation is concerned and so on. Now, anonymization setup done, truncate tables done. Let's talk about processing for a moment here. So processing, as said, is a process. So there's not too much to see, but actually what I would like to do is start the anonymization, which takes about a minute, and then the whole database will actually be anonymized, and then we can actually come back afterwards while we actually have done a poll in between. And just to prove that it actually is going to work, because that's always, of course, nice to see, I actually have taken a person, yes, Meredith Lombard, that actually is here in the system, and her name now, as you can see, CC0001 is now called Meredith Lombard, and she has a particular birth date, and she has a particular national ID, and she has an address in Australia, and she has phone numbers, and she has campus IDs, as you can see. So she is a quote normal person. She doesn't exist because she's already the combination of 3 different types of data, because I actually run this process today already 3 times, but still it is a recognizable person, right? So let me actually just go here, run the setup. Yep, excuse me, run the process. And
Ernst,
in the meantime,
this is Hendricks. Are you segueing now to the right to be forgotten
yes.
element of this?
No, I would like to actually, yes, yes, my idea is I click the run button, and then we switch back to you to actually do the other poll, or at least actually talk about the right to be forgotten, and then I come back to actually show the results and actually also show the right to be forgotten in the system. Is that okay?
Right. Okay, good. Okay, great. Thank you.
No problem at all. So as you can see, there's multiple application engines. There's one that actually focuses on mass anonymization. There's one that focuses on manual anonymization. And there's one also that actually is a job that actually focuses on truncating tables in combination with identifying and scrambling identifiers like Ample IDs. We've created these different jobs just for us and just for people that actually work with us to make sure that they have different options to work with. One thing is very important to mention. The mass anonymization does not work in production. It doesn't. It's technically impossible. One, we have taken out the permission in production for anybody to run this process. Secondly, even if you would actually be able to, we actually have made checks in the code to say, is this database really your production database that you have configured as such in the installation? If yes, then we are not going to continue and we're going to stop processing. Or we're going to actually even stop before we do anything. So we make it absolutely 100% sure that you cannot by mistake, by default, or actually on purpose, actually anonymize your whole database. That's impossible in production, but you can safely run the manual one, as we'll see in a moment. So If I click this, it actually asks you, are you sure? Because you will update the whole database. Yep, I am. Are you really sure? Yes, I am. And now this is running, and I can actually go back to you, Hendricks, please, if I can. And while we wait for a moment, then we actually can see the database is going.
Yeah, and there's actually one of the, I was looking at the questions, Ernst, and one of the questions was, how long does it take to anonymize? And I think this database is 35,000 records.
35,000 students under
Okay.
a minute.
Okay. All right,
You
good.
can wait if you want for it, but actually there is a PowerPoint slide that we can show in between, so that's absolutely. But you will see I can show you the timeline afterwards, so
right.
You're absolutely sure. Please go ahead.
So this is a good good segue. So Ernst had mentioned right to be forgotten. This is obviously front and center in the EU, and probably soon to be, if not already, something that will become more frequent from your constituents, whether they're employees, students, customers, whatever, in terms of requesting the right to be forgotten. Ernst will, once he's done the mass anonymization, will then segue to a demo of how you would use our Anonymizer solution to address right to be forgotten requests. But what I thought I would do, this will help us get a sense of where sort of this RTBF is in the US. I'm going to launch our second poll, which is, I think you guys can see that. So if those of you that are still here and you feel like answering, we'd love to get a view into how your organization complies with right to be forgotten, or maybe you haven't received any yet. Looks like a lot have not received, and then the rest are manual, and perhaps people are not receiving, organizations are not receiving that many, so manual is okay. I think we're good. I'm going to close and I'm going to share the results. So just as I said, a lot of not yet received RTBF requests, and then the rest are being done manually. So thanks for answering.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Super. So I think Ernst, shall I shift back to you?
Yeah, let's shift back to me, because
Okay.
Can you show the next slide for 1 second so that I can actually then?
Yep, absolutely.
I'm pretty sure that,
yep.
No, sorry, that's not the one I wanted. Sorry, then you can flip back to me. Sorry, I was actually thinking about something else, but I think I actually forgot. Never mind, that's fine. Can you flip back to me? Oh, great, thank you.
Yep.
Perfect, lovely. So there's always a tricky moment in the live demo that it actually worked, because I didn't check if the run status actually worked or not in the meantime. But guys, it's actually very positive. It actually was successful, and I can check the details here for a second to see how long it actually took this time around. It took 1.5 minutes, people. So this is the demo database from Oracle. It's 35,000 Ample IDs, something around that line at least. And it took 1.5 minutes to actually update all the data. So if I just go back let's go back to Meredith. Why not? So, here we go. So Meredith no longer is called Meredith, because Meredith is now called CTNY MChecks Cook. So, and her birth date has been changed, and she actually has no longer a national ID because we deleted that. And one of her phone numbers has been updated. The other one hasn't. And the reason that the other one hasn't is because I did not actually change her business phone number. I actually had set skip. So that's why it actually is no longer there. Her email address has been updated with a test email address. And as you can see, her address itself has also been updated to become what we call foreign address here. Foreign address with with the concatenation of the Ample ID behind it, simply because that way we actually can see better if it's in a table what actually is going on with that particular record. All of this is actually not very readable, or let's say, you could say readable or not readable, but the intent here is not to be readable. The intent here is to actually be anonymizing and make sure that any developer actually working with this data is no longer going to say, aha, let me check why this particular person that I know has a negative service indicator, or what her FERPA indications are or anything like that. So we want to make absolutely sure it's impossible for somebody to check who this particular person is anymore. And would you actually go back, just to actually give you an idea, maybe if you have worked with the production or if the database from Oracle before, everybody knows that AA001 actually is not Martha Paney. It's actually a guy, I don't know his name precisely, but AA0001 in the database is no longer there. And if we would look for Betty Lockerty, she is no longer available, I can tell you as well. Any data in any of the rows in the whole database is now actually altered. There's nobody that actually has a name anymore that makes any sense. Everything is actually different. They still have names, as you can see, but all of their names are scrambled. And all of their email addresses have been altered, and all of their phone numbers have been altered, and all of their data has been wiped as far as you wanted to. There's no more advisory notes in the whole database available, and so on and so on. So anybody, any tester that complains that if we would actually anonymize the data that they can't actually test anymore because they can't recognize people, no, that's not true. As you can see, everybody still has a name. It's just actually no longer the name that you actually would have expected at first. So you can't actually check up on the grades of your sister-in-law or anything like that anymore, because those are actually now anonymized. So it's a really quick and easy way to actually anonymize. And the nice thing as well, especially for people who actually have test databases that actually are available for longer periods of time, you can actually run this process as many times as you like. So even if you're actually unfamiliar, or if you actually are unsure if data still actually is valid, or if you want to check some more corner cases, all you have to do is actually run the anonymizer again, and it will actually create a completely new set of data for all the personal data of these people. Of course, their program data, their grades, their financial data, their financial aid data, all of that actually remains the same, as long as you have not at least updated it for some reason. You can update anything. It's not actually focused only on personal data. You can focus on anything you like. But still, the focus is, of course, in most cases, about the anonymization. Now, let's say that we actually would like to take this person, AA001, just remember our Martha Paney here, and we would say, okay, now this is really production. And Martha calls us and says, okay, I would like to actually be forgotten. Now, the right to be forgotten in this context could be thought of in two ways. Either it's really Martha who says, I would like to be forgotten here, please. And this actually is interesting because this is the original name of this person, which we keep in one table, because otherwise we don't know who we've actually wiped out. But if we actually run this particular person, then this particular person will be manually now processed and will be anonymized. So if this is production, then in a few seconds from now, Martha is no longer Martha, so to say, and is certainly no longer Moss, because this person actually was one of the people I actually had manually transformed earlier as well. So when we actually process people manually, they are run through a series of component interfaces, which means that any other system that actually needs to know about the changes that we're doing in production is also informed. So if you have a data lake, or if you have other systems that actually drive off the personal data from Campus Solutions, those other systems are also be made aware of the fact that actually there is no change of name for this particular person. And if we now actually go to AA001, we'll find that there is no longer AA01 anymore, but there is first name AA001, last name AA01. And there's no more birth date, and there is no more data almost at all. And the reason why is because we've actually just updated this person, and we've only updated one person. Now, what we see happening, and this is again happening more and more in institutions, what if a whole program needs to be updated? Or people who've actually done a particular, let's say, business graduation school, if we actually say anybody who actually was in the finance class or in the finance program over the last period, what if we would actually update all of those? Then for all of those people, we validate if they're an out of scope constituent, in which case we're not going to actually anonymize them. We're going to validate if they have organizational relationships with us. We're going to validate if they have personal relationships with us, because as said, once in production anonymized, there is no turning back. They're gone. There's only one table left in the whole system that knows who they really were. The rest is gone. So when we actually run this process for these 7 people, excuse me, we actually are going to update those people in our production system to actually be no longer recognizable. So everybody that was on our course over the last week or two are now going to be anonymized and they're no longer available. Well, their data is still there, they're just not recognizable anymore. So from a analysis point of view, in validating how many programs we've actually sold or how many people we actually had as students over the last year, we're still perfectly fine. None of our data got lost there. But when we actually check about what they actually are and who they are, then it's no longer possible to actually see who they were. And as you can see, no errors, 7 people are now anonymized, and trust me, this person no longer exists. And this is something that we do more and more. The right to be forgotten is actually something which is actually executed by some, absolutely. But more and more people are just saying, listen, I just would like you to actually anonymize the data of the people that I actually sent to you as a company when they are actually done with their education. And in this way, you're very safe. There's only the 7 people who are going to be anonymized. And we've actually been discussing actually putting population selection behind this as well to make it even more flexible to select the right population of data, actually including or excluding anybody that we don't want to anonymize because of some reason, and mostly in this context contributor relation reasons or something specific in CRM, and then we actually anonymize them, as you can see.
Ernst, are we at a break point?
Yes, we are actually. I mean, yes, because this actually shows you how easy it is to actually manually update everybody in production, or how quick it was to actually update the whole database.
Thank you.
So
thanks,
please,
Ernst. Stephanie, I wonder if this might not be a bad time to switch to questions.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for your presentation. Again, if you have any questions, please add them now into the chat box. I think we answered at least 1 or 2 while we were, while the presentation was going on. So if you guys want to go ahead and look at those questions, you can let me know.
Yep, I'll go ahead. I can read. Sorella has a question. How do you handle non-prod environments that are used for testing integrations? I think we, Ernst, I think we answered that.
No, I'm going to say one thing I actually didn't say because actually it was more technical than anything else, but what I wanted to mention was the anonymization of data of clones is actually done automatically as part of the cloning process. What we actually do is we ask our DBAs to update the database or to clone the database. And then before they actually open the database to people, they run the application engine as a standalone process next to the database. So the environment is not really up and running yet, but the database is up and running. And then we actually have a cron script or a Windows batch script that actually just runs the application engine, which actually then runs on the basis of a predefined template in that database. And that batch process is then actually kicked off and actually anonymized the whole database. So, and when you're speaking about integrations with external systems and in external integrations, as long as we don't actually update the Ample IDs, we're normally okay. Once we also actually update the Ample IDs, you're absolutely right, then we are out of sync with any other system. And therefore, not everybody actually always anonymizes the Ample IDs or actually scrambles them. We have environments where they actually scramble everything, as well as the ones which actually are more focused on integrations whereby they do scramble the personal data, but they don't actually scramble the Ample IDs. Thank you for the question. Yeah.
Yep. There's a couple other questions. How would you deal with the logic checking for numbers in a name? I'm not sure I understand that, but I guess maybe there's some names that actually have numbers in them rather than letters. I don't think it matters to us, right?
The name fields are strings, so we literally take the field value and we put it somewhere else. So we don't actually change anything on the name pieces. We just actually take the different pieces of the name, and afterwards we actually update the more combined name pieces and create the name, the display name, the formal name, and so on. So we recreate the larger name concepts in the names table, and everything that actually is the underlying, let's say, pieces of the puzzle are moved around from one row to the other, but we don't touch the actual content.
Right. There's another question which I think might bear a little bit sort of off webinar discussion, and that's how do you know which records are candidates to be anonymized, especially non-Oracle records? I mean, it's my understanding, Ernst, that we're working with PeopleSoft records, not non-Oracle. Is that correct? Or
No, I think the question is in this case, let's say custom records probably. So there's two comments here. One is we run queries against the whole database to see which records hold particular values or particular fields. So we have queries that we actually use in discussion with clients to actually see, for instance, if a particular value, like an Ample ID value, in which tables in the whole database that exists, and based on that, we actually then recognize that that particular record should be anonymized, for instance. And the other parts, of course, part of it actually is just knowledge in the sense of, I mean, but then actually most of our clients as well know, of course, the records, the main records that actually hold personal data. But running some of those queries against the whole database to validate all the tables in the database for particular values, like a first name or a last name or an Ample ID or a birth date, actually helps enormously, because as you're absolutely right, question whoever you are, absolutely right, there are really weird places in the system where Oracle, PeopleSoft, actually stores personal data, even when we don't know it. So it's absolutely true. We actually run through the whole database and actually validate particular values and particular field names and check which records they are, check if there's values in them, and if there is, then we put them into the list. And next time that we run the anonymization, it's even more thorough in its response.
Okay, thank you so much for those answers. If there are any more questions that we needed to get to, we encourage you to email Hendricks or Ernst at hendricks.boden@cy2.com. You'll see it right here on the screen, or you can email events@pathlock.com with any of your questions. We have another session coming up in about 5 minutes, so we need to jump off this one. But we appreciate everyone for coming, and we hope to see you at future events.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you.